All right, everyone. I wanted to let you all know that we are going to re release 10 of our favorite episodes from 2024 to give ourselves a little bit of a break from recording. I really appreciate everyone that listens and subscribes and shares and tunes in every single Saturday for the last 3 years. We'll be back in a couple of months with new interviews and new information and new resources for all of you awesome entrepreneurs out there. Make sure to stay up to date. Follow me on Instagram, Patrick.Casale, and all things private practice. Doubt yourself, do it anyway. Hey everyone, you are listening to another episode of the All Things Private Practice podcast. I'm your host, Patrick.Casale. Today I'm joined by Blaise Harris. He is an LCMHCA, LCAS A in North Carolina, and also the host of the Dope Black Therapist podcast. And today we are going to talk about fears, failures, insecurities around starting a small business and just kind of see where this goes, because this is always a wonderful topic for the podcast to help normalize these things that don't often get talked about. So, Blaise, thank you so much for making the time and coming on.
Man, thanks so much for having me. It's been an adventure, and I'm always honored to be able to speak and just talk about my story and what's going on. And it's still weird to kind of be like, man, people actually care about what I think. It's-
Yeah, that's a weird feeling, right? Like we
it
were
is.
saying before we started recording. So, your story is a powerful one. And this is the first time we're actually meeting, but I follow you on social media as well. And I've seen some of your posts, and it sounds like it's been a journey and
Yeah.
ups and downs for sure.
Yeah, man. It's one of those things. It's like a lot of times you don't realize that what you go through is anything different. And then becoming a therapist is like, oh shit. Oh, oh shit. That's a thing. So it's just like, wow, okay. I just thought it was just me growing up as a black kid in a trailer park, because that means that was my norm, you
Yeah.
know. And then you go to school and you learn these things. So you might have had some adverse childhood experiences. The hell is an adverse childhood experience?
Start counting ACE scores and you're like, oh, five,
Yeah,
six,
yeah,
7, 8.
yeah,
Shit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then not only that is just like, okay, so let's check out the criteria for, you know, major depressive disorder. Now for me, I'm sitting there, it's just like, for somebody who grew up thinking therapy was nope. Black folks don't do that. You pray about it or you keep it to yourself.
Right.
And then being diagnosed with major depressive disorder, like, what's that? And you learn all these different types of things. And it's like the stuff that you've experienced and, dealing with intense sadness, dealing with, uh, decreased mood and, isolating yourself and not eating and not sleeping and suicidal thoughts and you're getting irritable and all this kind of stuff. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. I thought when you depressed, you just sad. I
Yeah.
learned so much more, man. And that's one of the things that, I'm excited about with being a therapist, that I get to actually break some of the stigma and break some of that stuff down, especially for people who look like me,
Yeah.
who thought
Absolutely.
like I did. You know what I'm saying? So
And you're also an author. You have a book that's published. So congrats on that. I mean, that's
yeah,
amazing. What does
yeah,
it feel like to say, like, okay, I've got a podcast, I've got a book out, I have a therapy practice. People clearly want to hear what I have to say.
yeah. It's still like, and we said it before, man. It's weird as hell, dude. It's like I don't. It's like this stuff ain't supposed to happen to me, you know. And it's like when you go into a field, you don't go into it like when I went into therapy. I went into it because I wanted to I wanted to help people. I wanted to, well, specifically first responders. And for those who don't know, I was a firefighter for 14 years. And my divorce, my divorce fucked me all the way up. Like it fucked me up to the point where, wasn't eating, lost all that weight, and, 2 suicide attempts, admitted myself to a mental health facility. And that's when I learned about major depressive disorder and what it was going on and anxiety and stress and what all this stuff looked like. Right. And so, while I call it in the book, Becoming a Dope Black Therapist, my vacation. So 5 days away, no phone, no TV, no outside interactions with the outside world. And that's when I learned that I had major depressive disorder. And I learned about group therapy and what that looked like. And while I was gone, nobody knew where I was, like when I was in the fire service, because, the culture there is like, once you enter these doors, everything that you're dealing with outside is supposed to vanish as soon as you walk through these firehouse doors.
Right.
And then all the things you see at work, as soon as you cross that threshold, you're not supposed to take that home.
Talk about endless vicarious trauma and
Right.
roll up that.
Right. And that thing is unrealistic. And the culture of first responders is we're not allowed to feel because, we're supposed to keep the stuff down. We might see something worse, 5 minutes later.
Right.
Now, fortunately, the culture is changing. Mental health is being talked about. Peer support groups are being formed. People are able to come out and talk about it. So if I can be this happy-go-lucky guy and smile and nothing's wrong, but go through all of this stuff and people not know about it, how many other first responders go through the same thing?
Absolutely.
So initially, I became a therapist to work with other first responders, and I got to grad school and I was like, Black people don't do therapy, period. And I realized how much of a unicorn I was in this profession. I think I had 3 brothers in my class, like in my graduating class. Yeah. So, and it's just like, I can do something in my community to make it a big difference, but how was I going to still do that in the fire service? And that was one of my biggest fears. I'm going to leave this secure job, insurance, state of paycheck, I get to do what I love. I'm helping people. I work 10 days out of the month.
Right.
And I could do whatever and I'm good. And I was just like, holy shit. I'm going to leave all of that security and start doing therapy full time.
That had to be a pretty horrifying thought to feel like I'm stepping into the unknown, especially like you mentioned, as a Black man in the South who's doing therapy, where culturally we would say at large, a lot of Black people, like you mentioned, therapy is just not something that's happening. We're seeing it more and more, and it's fucking great.
Yes, I love it.
But it is still a barrier. And then you have another barrier, right, of like working in first responder culture. So there are all these barriers to like break through for treatment.
Right.
But you decided, I'm going to pursue this anyway.
And it was a lot of soul searching. I've talked to, I can't remember how many colleagues of mine, because I transitioned from 24-hour shifts to Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, in the fire service. And I would see clients from when I didn't have I'm a single dad on top of that too, right? So 50-50 joint custody with my kids. And so on the nights that I didn't have my kids, I would leave work and still see clients from 5 to 9. And I was like, holy shit, it's a lot, but I'm not going to move any higher in this position that I'm in now in the fire service. I'm stuck. There's no opportunity for growth here.
Sure.
There's no opportunity for me to excel. I'm not going to get paid what I'm worth, regardless of how much I put into what I'm doing. And I was like, fuck it. This is a field that I know that I can do well in. I have to talk to my colleagues, they talk about, how much they bring home and how much flexibility they have and all of these, all the benefits of doing therapy full time and what it looks like, and I was like, okay, I've talked to all these people. I've done my research. I've looked at all this stuff. I need to make this amount of money. I can do this amount of money. Let's do it. And I resigned from the fire service after 14 years, New Year's Eve, 2020. And I started doing therapy full time, January 4th, 2021. And I haven't looked back since.
Besides the initial fear and anxiety, any regrets about that decision?
I miss driving the fire truck. That's the only thing. I miss driving the fire truck. I miss running calls, and I miss the camaraderie of being with a crew. I do miss that. the thing about it is I can still hang out with them. I dropped by the station the other day and I saw folks say, "Hey, Blaise, what's going on? You doing therapy full time, man? I heard all of this. You're doing all of this, man. It's great." And I can still go to firehouses and talk to folks and sit down. I can't drive the trucks, but I still get to see. I still get to see some of the things that I enjoyed about being in the fire service.
Right.
And one of the biggest parts that I really enjoy is just like I have first responders who I may have come across in some way, shape, form, or fashion who knew that I was a therapist. It's like, "Hey, man, can we talk?" And I'm
What's
like,
that feeling like?
it's amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's really amazing because you think about, because we went from you ain't supposed to talk about this shit
Yep.
to, "Hey, man, I might need some counseling,"
Yeah.
and it's just like, wow, this is really changing because we're not going to just talk to anybody, right? You can be one of the things that you talk about is finding your niche. I love saying that, finding where you are and finding this population that you really work with, right? And I know that with my experiences, police, EMS, dispatchers, fires, whoever, they're gonna feel comfortable talking to me because they know that if they talk to me about any kind of story, I'm not gonna be like, "Oh."
Yeah, you're not going to be rattled by the
Right,
things that come out of their mouths.
right. And it's just like it's they can be themselves. And I think that's one of the things they really enjoy because man, I'm telling you, man, some therapists, some of the horror stories that I hear about some of the folks who've been to therapy and the things that they've heard and the shit that some of the therapists say, it's like, "How did you get your license?"
It's, man, we could have a whole podcast episode on that. Actually writing a book that's probably going to ostracize me from the profession eventually. But back to your story. So
Yeah.
I think you're hitting on some really important parts of this
Yeah.
because what's important, especially for any community, whether it be a marginalized community, whether it just be a population of, like you said, medical professionals, EMTs, et cetera, who just aren't supposed to talk. We can
Yeah.
even throw military in there,
Yes.
law enforcement, et cetera.
Mhm.
Um, leave this shit at the door. You have to respond. You have to be in action mode all the time. What you're doing is just absorbing trauma, absorbing trauma,
Mhm.
absorbing trauma.
Mhm.
And then it comes out substance use, then it comes out in anger, irritability, relationship issues, whatever.
Mhm.
Suicide attempts, et cetera, are through the
Yeah.
roof for these populations.
Mhm.
So by being a part of that community, that and speaking openly about your experiences and sharing about what you've gone through
Mhm.
and being public about struggles, you are creating a massive ripple in the community at large because it allows for people to immediately break down a barrier, break down that wall, and admit to themselves, I may need to talk to someone. And I know that Blaise is a safe person I can turn to. And
Mhm.
whether he can be my therapist or can recommend someone he trusts, I am going to be much more inclined to pursue that instead of suffering in silence all the time.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's one of the things is it's like we don't think about the impact that we have, that we can create in certain areas and stuff. He's like, it's like we make it okay to talk about it. And it's like, okay, Blaise can go through this stuff and Blaise is feeling this kind of way. Oh shit. Blaise is one of those guys who's always smiling and he's always good. And he's struggling sometimes. And he talks to somebody about what's going on with him. Okay. Then maybe I can go do that. And that's one of the things that I started a men's group in my hometown.
I saw
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I said, hey, ain't nobody gonna do this. I know it's a need and they say they want it, but ain't nobody gonna come. And, the first night, one person showed up and I was just like, okay, there's one person who wouldn't have shown up in the beginning.
Right.
And then it started to grow,
Yep.
and more people started coming in and start talking about it. And one of the best comments that I've gotten, or one of the best statements that I've heard in the group is like, one dude said, "Y'all make me feel like I'm not strange.
Mm.
Y'all make me feel like I'm not strange. Like it's okay for me to have these thoughts and other men think the exact same way that I do."
Absolutely.
And like, it's like the power in that statement alone and them having a resource to actually in a space for them to actually voice that stuff and not feel like they're being judged and not feeling like they're being ostracized and not feeling like they're being made fun of. It's accepted, it's heard, and that's why I love what I do. That's why I love what I do, because I ain't have shit like this coming up, you know, and it's
Emotional just listening to you talk about this.
yeah, man. It's just like
So important.
yeah, it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now at the same time, brother had to take a break this month. Brother had to take a break this month.
Yes.
It's like because I still practice full time, and then my group is at like from 8 to 9, and I'm like, man, I need to breathe a little bit, and I need to take care of Blaise too, because if Blaise ain't doing right, he ain't gonna be able to do right for everybody else.
That's there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. And number one is the humanness, the validation of the human experience for people who feel like they can't talk about stuff. And that goes for multiple populations of people. And if we're talking about men specifically, that's another group that just feels like therapy. There's some aversion there. But there's so much power in validating human experience, whether it be negative or positive emotion, however we want to spin that, and how important it is to create community and to
Yes.
create connection, because that's where the healing takes place.
Mhm.
We've talked about one-on-one therapy and how important it is, but one 50-minute session a week or every other week is like, it's not enough. And we need community. We need connection. We need to feel like a part of as human beings. That's how we're wired. And then another important piece that you just named is that Blaise needs to take a break, right? Because you mentioned, and I'm just going to use your wording, you're kind of like this unicorn in this space. So that means that you're never really going to be hurting for clients. You're never going to be hurting to have a demand of people who are attracted to work with you. And I imagine, I want to choose my words carefully. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that there could be some feelings of like, because I know more people are going to be willing to talk to me, that I have to make myself more available, because I understand that most of the profession does not look like me.
Man, that there is so true. That's the thing. It is like I'm a helper by nature.
Yep.
Every job that I've had is I've helped people. I was a special needs teacher before I was a firefighter, then a firefighter, then therapist and AmeriCorps, all these different types of things. I serve.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yep.
Right. So with that mentality, I'm a fixer and a rescuer by nature.
Yep.
And I want to help everybody. And that's the thing is like, I want to help everybody. I want everybody to be okay. And it's just like, cause I don't want you to feel like I feel.
Absolutely.
But I was like, that's not my job. I can't save everybody. It's not my job to go out and accept every person that comes my way or somebody that comes in and asks us. Cause the reality is I can't make myself available 24/7, because if I do that, I'm taking time away from me, taking time away from my children, I'm taking time from my family, I'm taking time away from our friends.
Right.
I am missing out on that stuff. And it took me a while to realize that it doesn't make me a bad person for saying no.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big statement right there.
Yeah.
I imagine there's guilt that came up around that, and shame of like, this is so nuanced, and there's so many layers to this, because it's like institutionally and culturally in the profession, it's like you say yes, you sacrifice yourself, you help everybody else. To what we're talking about in general about just being who you are. So this is very layered, but the ability to say no is so important. And here's where people get it wrong a lot of the time. And I think, you just because you mentioned you've been listening to my podcast lately, should check out, if you haven't, the episode I did with Jetta Robinson early on, because she is a really powerful Black woman in DC who is an 8-figure business owner now, but talks about how like you can create impact in so many different ways other than just one-on-one 60-minute increments of time. And that is so important, because podcasting, books, groups, all of these things where you can create more accessibility to
Mhm.
people who maybe can't afford therapy or just don't have time for it. But it also helps even the scales mentally when you're
Mhm.
thinking like, I have to do everything. I have to be everything for everyone. And it's just not possible as one
Right.
person. In this field is too fucking hard.
Yeah.
Um, in a group practice, man, that could be a thing for
Right.
sure. If you
Yeah.
found some folks that you really felt like aligned with, but
Right.
there are so many ways to create impact and have that like ripple effect in the community that doesn't mean that Blaze has to be the person that's constantly available to everyone. And I'm
Mhm.
glad that you named that and that you named one that it was a struggle and two that you are now getting more comfortable being like, no, I can't do
Mhm.
it. Because
Mhm.
what will happen is your caseload will become 60 people a week. And then you're thinking like, this fucking sucks. Like
Yep.
I I'm in this profession that I've created for myself. This is going well by all accounts, and I'm burnt it the hell out. And
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking forward to vacations or time away from my
Yeah.
calendar. And that is not useful for you and it's not useful for your clients. So it's like that balancing act is so crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And that's exactly right. And it's just like I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I gotta have these spaces. I look at my calendar and I was like, I can't have blank spaces. I can't have blank spaces. I need to fill this because I'm new and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I have to constantly work, and I saw other therapists doing that same thing, just working, and working the whole time. It's just like, okay, that's what I gotta do. And
Right.
I was listening to an episode the other day talking about um when you first start out, you do all the community mental health, you do all those different types of things, you do all those things, and just like it's like you got to earn your stripes,
Yeah.
right, to do all that kind of stuff. And I was sitting there, I was at the gym, I was like, damn, that's right, I feel like I can do that shit too. And it's just like now I'm at a point where it's like if I have an empty slot, I was like, okay, that's great. That's some time for me to chill. I can read. I can take a nap. I can go for a walk. I can get some exercise in. I can do
Yep.
whatever it is I need to do, just to decompress for a little bit. You know,
Celebrating the emptiness is such a crucial thing in this because it's so easy to get caught up in the empty space and like we are overachievers as by nature
yeah,
and we're like okay, empty space means I could see one more client, I could be
yeah,
accessible to one more person, I can make more money. Empty space, once you get to that mental space where it's like celebrated, it's really
hmm,
wonderful. Like when
yes,
people, I don't practice as a clinician anymore, I haven't uh since September of this year.
wow,
But when I was getting like either cancellations or a client would text me and say, "Hey, I'm not coming today. Charge my card. I'll see you next week." I'm like, one, that feels like a victory, and two, I can go do whatever the fuck I want to do.
yeah,
And it was just such a massive mental shift from like when I first started, and it was literally like there was so much fear around blank spaces because it was like,
mhm,
"Oh my god, there's empty spaces. People are canceling. Nobody's ever gonna call me again because this is happening." And it domino effect snowballs, and you're like
yeah,
imposter syndrome nightmare, but you get
yeah,
comfortable with the uncomfortable as a small business owner. And I think that's really important to constantly check in with yourself about like, why did I start this in the first place? What was the reasoning? And anytime I poll people for like, what's your favorite thing about being a small business owner? It's like free time, autonomy,
mhm,
creativity. Nobody gets to set my schedule but me. And I
mhm,
love that. And always circling back to your values, but ultimately, a lot of people recreate their agency job environments because there's one, we live in a capitalist society. Two, it just feels like there's this internalized pressure that we always have to be doing something. So
yeah,
just letting that go,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it allows to create more. You
yeah,
can be more creative. Like when I have more free time in my calendar and I intentionally block it off specifically now, I can podcast more, I can
mhm,
create content, I will get better ideas for other ventures. Like I can't do that if I'm bouncing from thing to thing to thing to thing. And then the end of the day, I can't even think straight anymore.
yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things, man. Is like I I've been listening to a lot of the stuff and seeing a lot of stuff you do just in the group and everything, man. And I gotta thank you because you definitely opened my eyes to a lot of different things. It's like I ain't had no experience being a business owner or entrepreneur. And like I followed my supervisor, she's been really good and, mentoring me in this whole thing, and so she's like, she's so business savvy when it comes to these things. So I'm picking her brain about stuff, and she's definitely been a huge help for me. But I also look at what you do and what you give to people and what you show people and how they do these things. And it's helping me a little bit more. I feel like I can do therapy my way,
Mm.
and I don't feel bad about doing therapy my way. I think a lot of people, they come in and they think therapists going to be like, "Oh, you know, and I tell folks, it's like, listen, say I'll validate you, but I'll call you out of your shit too.
Yeah.
And like our conversation is going to be like this. And they're like, yo, for real? It's like, yes. And they feel like they so relaxed with it. I've practiced martial arts for a number of years, and I know how everybody say, okay, we're going to do wellness exercises or we're going to do all these grounding exercises. And it's usually breathing and all this type of stuff. Right.
Right.
I will, after them signing a waiver, obviously, put on these boxing gloves, and I'm an MDR trained therapist, and boxing is just bilateral stimulation.
Yep.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah.
And it's just like I had, I did this when I was working with another agency, and we had done it before, but then us dudes, we ain't gonna talk about stuff. Sometimes dudes is like, I don't want to do this shit.
Yep.
But we got a lot of anger inside, and they don't know how to express it.
Yep.
And I gave everybody a heads up. Hey, if you hear some yelling and some screaming and a lot of loud noises, it's okay. It's just us. We're just doing this process.
It's cathartic as hell, man.
Yeah. And so I did it, and we go through, and I had this dude like going through and just, and he told me, he said, Blaise, this was the best session I've ever had. But I get an email from the director saying, I don't know if we should do this afterwards. And I was like, and that was my cue to leave and start my own.
Good.
It's like I don't want to feel like I'm being watched by the man.
We all have that like fuck it last straw moment if
Mhm.
you've worked in an agency, for most of you listening, where it's just like, this doesn't make sense. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I would rather take the risk on my own than deal with the bullshit.
Mhm.
And it's amazing because there's so much gatekeeping in our profession about like how therapy is supposed to look. And therapy can look however you want it to look
Yes.
because it's individualized. So some person may need to come into your office and put on the boxing gloves and like do some bilateral stimulation that way. And that might be much more helpful than sitting across from you for 50 minutes and trying to drag conversation out of someone who doesn't want to talk or who
Mhm.
just isn't able to access that at the moment. So I'm all about it. And I think, and one, I just want to say thank you for the kind words before. I think therapy gets to look however we want it to look within reason. Like, obviously, I'm going to put some asterisks there because
Of
people will
course.
call me out on that and be like, well, you the ethical code says this, this, and
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But I really do believe that. And you're going to have much more of an impact if you can be creative with your clients. And it just, it's just so useful to think that way. So I'm glad that you're able to offer that now that you own your own business. And man, you're what you're doing is inspiring. And I think it's you just got to keep showing up and again keep taking care of you. And for those of you listening, like taking care of yourself in this profession is paramount. Like you cannot take care of other people if you cannot take care of yourself. And
Mhm.
it's very easy to get caught up in that trap of saying yes, saying yes, saying yes. And then you look at your calendar on Monday and you're like, I don't want to do any of this. And you don't want
Mhm.
to get to that point because it's very hard to come back from.
Yep.
But really cool stuff that you're doing, really cool stuff that you're offering. I mean, and you're just getting started. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of this. Like, I hope you can like anchor into that and remind yourself of that because you are just getting started with all of this. And there's so much to be done and there's so much potential and there's so many people to reach and consistency and creativity are key.
Yeah.
and just constantly, circling back to you, authentically you. And that is when you show up that way, for all of you listening, your clients are going to do better work. You're going to attract the right people. You're going to repel the right people. And both of those things are okay.
Yep.
You are not going to be for everybody.
Nope.
I am not for everybody. When people email me and tell me my cursing makes me sound unprofessional and lazy, you're not the right person for me.
Yeah. Yeah. They told me this, one of the things I cuss all the time. And I tell people, if you cuss like a sailor, cuss like a sailor. If you don't, if you be a saint, be a saint. But then, everything that I do is the dope black therapist. And people are like, well, you're going to turn some people away from that. Okay.
Good.
If they're offended by that, then I probably don't need to see them anyway.
Exactly.
Why do you call yourself that? Why can't you just be the dope therapist? It's like, okay, how many black therapists you know besides me? I'll wait. Oh, right. And then I represent a lot of people who don't realize that I exist.
Yep. Exactly.
So, and that's what it is. And I realize I can be a trigger for everybody. I know I'm a trigger. I can be a trigger for everybody. So, but that's okay. People who want to see me will come see me, and people who don't won't. And that's okay. If I'm not the therapist for you, I am not taking offense for it.
No.
I'm not offended by that. You do what you want to do. I want to be sure that you're getting therapy with the person that you want to get therapy from and need to get therapy from, who you feel comfortable with. And if that's not me, that is totally fine.
Absolutely.
I'm happy with you just getting some therapy.
Couldn't say it better myself. And I think that's the important piece here, is just to really embrace your story, your struggle, and embrace who you are, because people need your messaging out there. For those of you listening and just curious about getting started or fearful about getting started, I mean, this is a really powerful story, and I hope that this was helpful. This has been a cool conversation, man. I'm excited to meet you in a couple months in Portugal.
Likewise.
Just keep doing what you're doing, and really just keep showing up the way you're showing up, because you're changing lives, you're changing the community. And I think this is really, really awesome. I'm excited to see a year from now what you've been creating, because I'm telling you, man, the sky is the fucking limit.
I appreciate that, bro. I really do. It means a lot to hear. I'm looking forward to creating more myself. And one of the things you said earlier that really stood out, we look out for everyone, right? And one of the things that I've been starting to tell my clients, you do realize that you are a part of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So be sure that you're taking care of yourself.
You got some good one-liners in this episode. You should start putting these into your content and your website.
Oh, yeah. They coming. They come. Look, I've been taking notes while I'm listening to you and your guests, sir.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and just tell the audience where they can find your podcast and your book and all of your information too.
Okay, awesome. So my website is www.thedopeblackTherapist.com. You can find me on Instagram under _dope_black_therapist. My podcast is The Dope Black Therapist. You find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And my book, Becoming the Dope Black Therapist, is available on Amazon.
Very, very cool. Congrats on all the success, and wishing you a lot more. And to everyone listening to the All Things Private Practice podcast, all of that information will be in the show notes so that you have easy access to find all of Blaise's stuff that he's got created and going on in the world. And new episodes of the All Things Private Practice podcast are out every single week on all major platforms and YouTube. Like, download, subscribe, and share. Doubt yourself. Do it anyway. We'll see you next week.